Welcome to your own channel, Whispers in Deadlight. New chilling, horror, creepy encounters, ghost stories videos are waiting for you. Please subscribe this channel, so you never miss a moment of the darkness. Now let's begin with story number 1. Dead-end streets have a funny way of feeling like traps. Especially in small towns. Ours was no exception. A crooked little finger of asphalt that curled into nowhere, flanked on either side by houses that had seen better decades, and sealed off at the far end by a rusted chain-link fence and a wall of trees that swallowed light like a black hole. People in our town called it simply the woods. Not Maple Creek Forest or Oak Hollow Preserve, just the woods, like the name itself was a warning, a hush spoken under breath. I was 9 the first time I heard the stories. I think most kids are when the older ones start whispering. You know how it is. Some third grader with a chapped lip and a runny nose starts talking about ghosts, and suddenly the trees at the end of the block start looking different. By the time I was 12, the stories had thickened like old blood. They were no longer childish tales of monsters under beds. These were heavier things. Grown-up things. A girl who went missing. A dog that came back skinned. Breathing heard at night that wasn't your own. A shadow seen in the tree lean, always watching, never moving. The grown-ups never said much. But they didn't have to. Their silence was its own kind of story. My name is May. I lived on that dead-end street my whole childhood, and I thought I knew every inch of it. But the woods, that was the one place I never really knew. No one did. Not really. Until the night Lisa and I broke the rule. Until we met the Sphinx. It was a Saturday in early October, and there was something wrong with the sky. Not that it was stormy, quite the opposite, actually. The moon hung too low, too full, casting a silver wash over the houses like the world had slipped into grayscale. The air felt electric. Still. Like the seconds before lightning. Lisa had come for a sleepover, lugging a backpack full of nail polish, popcorn, and the latest Goosebumps books. But we never made it past the front yard. That's how it always starts, isn't it? You think you're going to have an ordinary night. Popcorn. Laughter. Horror books that make you giggle. But something in the air was different, and we both felt it. You could almost hear it crackling between us. Let's tell stories, Lisa said. Okay, but you go first. She smirked, brushing back her wild red curls, eyes glittering. Fine. Ever hear the one about the girl who saw eyes in the woods? I rolled my eyes. You know I live here, right? Everyone's told that one. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. Yeah, but this one's true. My cousin's friend said his sister saw something last week. Something real. With claws. And teeth. I laughed. But something cold danced down my spine. It wasn't the story. It was the air. That's when Lisa said it. We should go. I stared at her. Where? She pointed to the fence. To the trees. To the place we weren't supposed to go. You're insane. Come on, May. Just for a minute. I should have said no. But 12-year-olds don't think like that. Not when the moon is shining too bright, and the night feels too strange. We went. The chain-link fence that separated our world from the woods was barely 4 feet high and bent in the middle like someone had stepped on it too many times. We'd never dared to climb it before, not even during dares. But that night, we didn't even hesitate. There was a strange quiet on the other side, like the forest was holding its breath. The kind of silence that isn't really silence. More like the absence of the things that should be there. No chirping insects. No rustling leaves. Just nothing. The trees closed in quick. They were taller than they looked from the street. Thick trunks, black bark, twisted branches that stretched like skeletal arms overhead. The moonlight was choked into thin fingers of pale light. We walked slowly, each step crunching on dry leaves that sounded far too loud. Then we heard it. H-H-H-H-K-K. H-H-H-H. H-H-H-K-K. A sound like choking. A sound like something trying, and failing, to breathe. Lisa froze beside me. Her face had gone pale in the moonlight. Did you? I nodded, not trusting my voice. We should have turned back. Instead, we walked deeper. I started noticing things about the forest that didn't feel right. The trees had scars, deep claw-like gouges that spiraled around the trunks like something had sharpened its nails on them. The air smelled of copper and rot, like wet pennies and something long dead. There was a shoe lying off the path, a single moldy sneaker, the tongue torn out. Maybe someone dropped it, Lisa said, her voice too fast, too fake. Or ran out of it, I muttered. She didn't respond. We walked in silence for a while after that. Until we found the dolls. 6 of them. Old, dirty, naked. Lying in a circle, arms stretched toward one another, like they'd been arranged. Their eyes were missing, just black holes where glass used to be. Lisa bent down. Don't touch it, I snapped. She stood up quickly, hands shaking. Something growled. Not loud. Not close. But deep. And wrong. And then I saw the first set of footprints. Not human. Not animal. Just wrong. Elongated. 3 toes. Sharp indentations at the ends, like talons. We weren't alone. Lisa saw the light first, a faint silver glow up ahead. We stumbled into a clearing, maybe 20 feet wide. The trees stopped abruptly, as if afraid to get any closer. And there it stood. The thing we'd always whispered about. The Sphinx. It wasn't a statue or a riddle-spewing monster like the ones in books. It was alive. And it was hungry. Its body was gaunt, skin clinging to bone. Its fur came in patches, long in some places, completely bare in others. The face was something between a lynx and a jackal, stretched long, too long. Its jaw unhinged slightly as it breathed, revealing rows of mismatched teeth. Wet breath hissed from its throat. But the worst part. The eyes. Yellow. Wide. Intelligent. And angry. We couldn't move. We couldn't scream. It stepped forward. It stepped forward, slow, deliberate, like it was savoring the moment. Like we were already caught. Lisa made a sound, part sob, part gasp, and I knew she was about to bolt. My hand shot out, gripped her wrist. Don't, I hissed. Don't run. It likes that. Where I got that idea, I don't know. It wasn't something I'd heard in a story or read in a book. It was instinct, primal, ancient, like my bones remembered something my mind didn't. But she didn't listen. Lisa pulled away and ran. The creature let out a high, breathy keening sound. Not quite a scream, not quite a laugh. And then it moved. It didn't run. It slid, fast, impossibly fast, across the clearing, bones crackling with every step. I ran after her. Not out of bravery. Out of fear of being alone with it. Lisa was ahead of me. I saw her wild red hair flash between the trees like a beacon. But the forest didn't want us to leave. It twisted on itself, branches clawing at my clothes, roots rising like grasping hands to trip me. I heard it behind us. Breathing. Snarling. Laughing. I don't know how long we ran. Time stretched, bent, snapped back on itself. Every shadow looked like a claw. Every rustle sounded like the whisper of fur. And then Lisa screamed. A full, blood-curdling shriek that stopped me cold. Lisa! No answer. Only silence. And then, whispers. Low. Slurred. Like words were being formed by something that didn't quite know how to speak. Stay still. I turned in a slow circle, heart hammering. And there it was again. Not the creature but its voice. In my head. Or maybe under it. See me. I found her curled under the roots of a fallen tree, her face streaked with tears, lips bloodied where she'd bitten them. I saw it, she whispered. It was smiling. I wanted to tell her it didn't have lips to smile. But I didn't want to break the illusion of safety. We stayed there for a long time, shivering, the forest breathing around us. waiting, watching. Then something changed. A sound, not like the creature this time, but something older. A deep, vibrating hum, like the groan of the earth itself. It came from deeper in the woods, past where the trees grew thickest. Lisa looked at me with wide, glassy eyes. "It's not the only one," she said. That's when I realized. The Sphinx wasn't the danger. It was the guardian. We should have turned back. But something pulled us forward, not like a choice, more like gravity. There was a path, barely visible, overgrown with moss and roots. The kind of path that looks like no one's walked it in 100 years. We followed it. Each step took effort, like the forest was trying to push us away. But something deeper was pulling harder. We passed bones. Dozens of them. Some small. Some impossibly large. A deer skull with antlers sawed clean off. A child's tricycle rusted into the dirt. And finally, we reached a second clearing. Not wide like the first. This one was sunken, a pit surrounded by black stone pillars carved with symbols that hurt to look at. Lisa whispered, "I think this is where it feeds." There was something in the center of the pit. Something half buried. A door. It wasn't a normal door. It was stone, circular, covered in the same glyphs as the pillars. It throbbed. Not visually, but psychically. I could feel it, like it was alive. Dreaming. Lisa stepped toward it. "Don't," I begged. "Don't touch it." But her eyes were glassy, her body moving like it wasn't hers anymore. She reached for the stone. And just as her fingers brushed it, the Sphinx returned. It lunged into the pit with a scream that peeled the air like paint. Its claws raked across the stone, knocking Lisa back. But not before a single symbol lit up. Just one. The ground shook. The air grew thick. And something, from deep beneath the earth, answered. The Sphinx turned to me, and for the first time, I saw fear in its eyes. It wasn't guarding us from it. It was guarding it from us. The world broke. That's the only way I can describe it. 1 second, we were in the pit, the next, everything shattered. Sounds grew backwards. Light bled upward. The trees curled inward like burning paper. Lisa was screaming. Or maybe I was. The door cracked down the center. And something pushed. Not a monster. Not a creature. A presence. Ancient, vast, wrong. It didn't speak in words. It didn't need to. I felt it inside me, behind my eyes, in the marrow of my bones. It was hollow hunger. Infinite teeth. A question that should never be asked. And the Sphinx. It attacked. It threw itself onto the door, shrieking, tearing, burning. I saw its body disintegrate, bone by bone. It gave its life to keep the door from opening fully. And just before it vanished, its glowing eyes locked with mine. Run. We woke up on my front porch. I don't remember climbing the fence. I don't remember getting home. Lisa had scratches on her arms, deep ones, like claws. My clothes smelled like ash and old blood. We didn't speak. Not for hours. Not even when her parents picked her up the next morning, their faces pale with worry. Not when the police came to ask if we'd heard anything about the animal sounds the neighbors reported. Not even when we started having the same nightmares, dreams of the door, pulsing like a heartbeat in the earth. Lisa moved away that spring. We still write sometimes. But we never talk about that night. Never. Because we both know the truth. The Sphinx didn't stop it. Only delayed it. And someday, someone else will go into the woods. And knock on the door. And this time, no one will be there to stop it. It was the kind of summer evening that held too much stillness, the kind that makes the skin prickle. Not from cold, but from the weight of something unseen. July of 2015, hot as hell even after sunset, with the sky bleeding orange into violet. The town of Trenton, barely a pinprick on North Carolina's map, had settled in for another quiet night. Or so we thought. There were 3 of us: me, Alan, and Timothy. We'd been best friends since 2nd grade, the kind of friends forged not from shared interests, but from proximity, survival, and boredom. There wasn't much to do in Trenton besides fish, skip rocks, and try not to lose your mind from the nothingness of it all. So when Alan came up with the idea of camping in Blackwood Forest, we didn't hesitate. "Just one night," he had said, eyes gleaming. "One night out there, under the stars. Like we used to." Timothy looked skeptical. He always did. A little thin in the face, wiry, nervous fingers always twitching with some unspoken anxiety. But he nodded anyway, because Alan had that way about him. He made you believe things would be fine, even when they clearly weren't. We packed light, tent, sleeping bags, a few packs of hot dogs, marshmallows, firewood, flashlights, and a little Bluetooth speaker for music. We set out just before dusk, the 3 of us walking the winding trail into the woods like we had done 100 times before. But this time, there was something different in the air. Something heavy. Blackwood Forest had a reputation. Kids told stories about the place. About people going missing, about strange lights between the trees. They said the forest watched you. We laughed it off, the way kids do, because we were 17 and thought nothing could touch us. We found a small clearing surrounded by tall pine and ash, the kind of place where the sky opens up just enough to see the stars. We pitched the tent, lit the fire, and cracked jokes as the orange flames licked the dark. The smoke spiraled upward like a spirit released, dancing toward the heavens. Then came the stories. Timothy told the first one, a weak tale about a hook-handed killer that Alan mercilessly mocked. Alan followed with something about a demon dog that stalked travelers in the woods. His voice dipped low as he leaned into the firelight, shadows stretching across his face, casting devilish hollows beneath his eyes. When it was my turn, I hesitated. I didn't want to tell the one that had been tugging at the corners of my mind since we stepped into the woods. The one about my cousin, who swore he saw something crawling on all 4s outside his tent 2 summers ago. Something with too many joints in its legs, too much hunger in its eyes. But I didn't tell it. Not yet. Instead, I laughed and passed the bottle of soda. The night wore on. The fire crackled and spat, sending little embers floating like lost souls. We roasted marshmallows, listened to the distant hoot of an owl. Then, as the silence began to close around us, Alan grinned that crooked grin of his. "Hey Timothy," he said. "I dare you to walk into the thicket. Just for a minute." Timothy stiffened. The thicket was a dense patch of undergrowth about 30 yards from our camp. Gnarled trees clumped together so tightly that light barely made it through in the day, let alone at night. "Hell no," Timothy said, eyes wide. "Oh, come on," Alan goaded. "You scared. That did it." Timothy snatched his flashlight with a sudden, sharp movement and stood. "1 minute," he muttered, already walking. The flashlight beam bounced wildly as Timothy vanished into the thicket. We watched the light flicker between the branches until it was gone, swallowed whole by the trees. A minute passed. Then 2. Alan poked the fire with a stick, but his eyes never left the trees. "Think he's okay?" I asked. "He's fine. Probably trying to freak us out." But the crickets had stopped chirping. That's what I noticed first. The silence. Heavy and pressing, like a pillow over the face of the world. The kind of silence that doesn't just happen, it arrives. I stood up. "I'm going to check on him." Alan nodded, a little too quickly. We both took our flashlights and stepped into the darkness. The forest greeted us like an open mouth, the light from our fire fading behind. Every branch creaked like old bones. The air smelled damp and metallic, like rust and rot. "Timothy," I called. No answer. Then, from deep within the thicket, came a sound that didn't belong. A low growl. We froze. The growl wasn't like a dog's or a bear's. It sounded wrong. Wet and thick, bubbling from the shadows like it had claws. Alan's flashlight shook in his hand. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because that was when we saw the light, Timothy's flashlight, bobbing through the trees. And then we saw him. He was just standing there. Frozen. Pale. His light pointed into the darkness behind him. "It's in there," Timothy stammered. "Something's in there." We crept forward. Slowly. Step by step. And that's when I felt it. The change in the air. Like the forest itself had sucked in a breath, and was holding it. That's when I saw it. At first, it looked like part of a tree. But then it moved. Eyes. Red-orange, glowing like coals. Limbs too long and too thin, twisted in ways that defied anatomy. It crouched low, almost spider-like, yet massive. The air around it shimmered like heat on asphalt. It bared its teeth. So many of them. Jagged and glistening. "Run!" I screamed. We didn't look back. Not at first. We just ran. The forest exploded around us, branches tearing at our clothes, thorns scratching our skin, the stink of moss and wet earth thick in our noses. Behind us, we heard it, the thing. It wasn't silent anymore. It was loud, crashing through the underbrush with a ferocity that sounded like the woods were being torn apart, tree by tree. Every footfall behind us made the ground quake. Every snap of a branch was too close. Alan screamed, an involuntary, guttural noise ripped straight from his gut, as something whizzed past his head. I saw it only for a second, a branch broken mid-air, spinning like a thrown spear. "Faster!" I shouted, but it felt like the air itself was holding us back. Like the forest wanted us to stay. Like it loved what it had found. Timothy tripped and fell. I stopped, skidded in the dirt, turned back for him. His flashlight had shattered, casting broken beams across the leaves like shards of moonlight. He looked up at me with blood running down his cheek, mouth moving but no sound coming out. I grabbed his arm, pulled him up with a strength I didn't know I had, and together we stumbled back to the campsite, where the tent glowed faintly in the distance, like a candle flickering inside a tomb. We dove inside, all three of us, collapsing into a pile of limbs and fear. And then came the scratching. The sound was worse than the growl. Worse than the crashing footsteps. Worse than the sight of those fire-glowing eyes. Because it was slow. Deliberate. The tent's thin nylon walls shuddered under its touch, as claws, or fingers, dragged in long, painful streaks across the surface. Not slashing. Just testing. It knew what the tent was. It knew we were inside. Alan sat bolt upright, pale as moonlight, his breathing ragged. Timothy was still gasping, eyes darting back and forth like a trapped animal. "What do we do?" Alan whispered. "Stay quiet," I said. My own voice trembled, my throat dry and tight. The scratching stopped. Silence fell again. A silence that watched us. And then we heard it breathe. Just outside the tent. Heavy. Wet. Like something broken was trying to remember how to inhale. It moved, its weight making the ground shift under us. We could hear its joints pop and click as it crawled, slowly, around the perimeter of the tent. My mind screamed, "Don't move. Don't even blink." Timothy whimpered once, and I clamped my hand over his mouth. Seconds passed like hours. Then, nothing. It was gone. Or so we thought. Eventually, the sky lightened. It started as a pale gray at the edges of the tent, then a soft golden haze filtered through. The birds didn't sing. We didn't move until the sun was fully up. When we finally unzipped the tent, the world outside looked wrong. The trees were silent, the air unnaturally still. Our campsite had been ravaged, cooler overturned, backpacks shredded. A dark smear of something we couldn't identify streaked across the side of the tent. Blood. Sap. Something else? None of us spoke. We moved mechanically, like zombies, packing our things with trembling hands. Alan kept glancing back toward the thicket. Timothy wouldn't even look that way. His eyes had changed. They looked older. Hollow. We left without breakfast. Without water. Just left. But the forest didn't want to let us go that easily. We were halfway down the trail when the forest shifted. I swear it. The trees leaned in. The path curved where it hadn't before. The sunlight dimmed. It felt like we were walking in circles. Alan cursed. This isn't the way. The big rock's supposed to be here. It was here, I said. It was. Timothy suddenly pointed off the trail. There, he whispered. Look. And in the distance, between two ash trees, stood a figure. Still as a statue. Watching. It wasn't human. Too tall. Too thin. Limbs like stilts. No face, just a dark, yawning oval where one should have been. And as we stared, frozen in place, it took a single step forward. Then, another. We ran again. We didn't stop until we hit the road. We burst from the woods like a pack of deer, stumbling out onto the cracked two-lane backroad just as a rusted blue pickup rolled into view. The driver slammed the brakes and skidded to a stop. A middle-aged man with a face like worn leather and eyes that had seen too much stepped out. "What the hell?" he asked, mouth open. We couldn't answer. He drove us back to town without asking many questions. He didn't need to. He'd seen things too. There was something in his silence that told me that. When he dropped us off at Alan's house, he only said one thing. "Whatever followed you out of there, you make sure it stays out." And then he was gone. We never spoke about that night again. Not directly. Timothy moved away by fall. Said he wanted to live with his cousin in Charlotte. He didn't even finish high school. Alan started drinking more than he should have. Said it helped him sleep. Me. I kept dreaming about the thicket. Worse than that, I kept hearing it. At night. In my room. When everything was quiet. I'd hear the scratching again. Not on a tent wall this time, but on my window. And always, just before I woke up, I'd see those eyes. Burning through the dark. Watching. Waiting. 10 years passed. I thought I'd moved on. But 2 months ago, Alan called me. His voice was shaking. "It came back," he whispered. "It followed me." Then the line went dead. I haven't been able to reach him since. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe guilt, maybe something darker, but yesterday I drove back to Trenton. Back to the edge of Blackwood Forest. It was still there. Still silent. Still watching. And now, I'm going back in. I'm writing this from the back of my car, just outside the trailhead. If you find this, if you're reading it, I want you to know, we weren't lying. The stories are real. The forest hides things, things that should never be seen. I can't explain what we saw. I'm not sure I want to. But it's still out there. Maybe it always has been. Maybe it needs people to know it exists. Or maybe it feeds on being forgotten. I'm going back to find Alan. Or what's left of him. If I don't make it back, don't come looking. Some places are meant to be left alone. Some doors, once opened, never shut again. And some thickets are alive. There are places in the world that don't just exist on a map. They live in your bones. They stick in your memory like a thorn in your heel. Quiet, small, but impossible to ignore. For me, that place was the woods behind our old property in northern Maine. I grew up in the thick of it. Trees so tall they seemed to scrape the belly of the sky. Trails that twisted and curled like veins into the heart of a wild, breathing wilderness. We were just a speck on the map. Me, my 2 older brothers, and my father, living off a dirt road that turned to mud by October and ice by December. Beyond our backyard was something vast, unbroken. You could walk for miles and not see another soul, just squirrels chattering, birds cutting through branches, and maybe the flash of a deer's white tail vanishing into the underbrush. My dad lived for those woods. He was the kind of man who believed in hard living, good boots, and the sacredness of silence. A real backwoodsman, the kind they don't really make anymore. And he passed that life on to us the way some fathers pass down pocket watches or heirloom rifles. Our inheritance wasn't gold or land, it was knowledge. How to find deer tracks in frozen ground, how to tell if scat was fresh, how to move without sound through pine needles thick enough to swallow your feet. I used to love it out there. Loved the solitude, the crisp smell of birch bark and moss. Loved the way the wind whispered things you couldn't quite hear unless you stood still long enough to let the world go quiet around you. But after that day, I don't go into the woods alone anymore. Not since I heard the knocking. Not since I saw what followed. It was the weekend before deer season opened. I remember that clearly because my dad had that particular gleam in his eye. Half anticipation, half solemnity. Hunting wasn't just a sport for him. It was a ritual. And scouting was the opening prayer. "Go on and take the southern loop," he said that morning, handing me a thermos and a compass. "Look for fresh rubs. If you find droppings, get downwind and mark it. Don't push too deep." I was 19 then. Old enough to go alone, young enough to still feel immortal. By the time the sun had climbed just above the treetops, I was 5 miles in, past the old logging road and the twisted cedar grove we called the Devil's Teeth. I'd found 3 scrapes already, one of them still damp with scent. Good signs. Real good signs. I was crouched near a game trail, marking a spot with blaze tape, when I heard it. Knock knock. A hollow metallic sound, like someone beating a wrench against an oil drum. Rhythmic. Deliberate. It echoed strangely through the trees, bouncing in a way that made it impossible to pinpoint. I froze. You don't hear sounds like that in the woods. The knocking continued. Knock knock. Pause. Knock knock. It felt wrong. Not just unnatural but unwelcome, like something trying to make its presence known, loudly, rudely. I scanned the trees, heart ticking a little faster now. Could have been some off-grid loggers or survivalists. I'd heard stories. But we knew everyone within 20 miles, and no one worked this deep into the forest. Not anymore. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. And that's when the silence came. Not the peaceful hush of a forest in autumn. This was a vacuum. A void. No wind. No birds. Even the insects were gone. That silence settled over everything like a heavy, wet wool blanket. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I let it out in one long, shivering exhale. I told myself I was being paranoid. My brain trying to make patterns out of noise. A fallen branch, maybe. A woodpecker striking something strange. But even then, I didn't believe it. I started moving again, a little quicker than before. Maybe not quite running, but close. My eyes kept darting toward the trees, searching for something I couldn't name. And that's when I saw the first shred of fabric. It was stuck on a broken branch, fluttering slightly despite the still air. Faded red. Torn like it had been ripped in a hurry. A few feet further, I saw a zipper. Not attached to anything. Just lying there in the pine needles. Then came the buckle. A cheap plastic one, cracked clean in half. A toy car. The corner of a laminated card. A shoelace, knotted and muddy. It wasn't a campsite. It wasn't trash dumped from a bag. It was too spread out. Too sporadic. It looked like something had dropped those things on purpose, as if leaving breadcrumbs. I didn't like the implication. Not one damn bit. The deeper I went, the stranger things became. The trees started changing, becoming twisted, almost bruised. Gouges in bark, deep and jagged. Branches cracked clean off, lying in patterns that didn't feel natural. I came upon one pine that had been shredded. Not just scratched, but shredded, like a bear had taken a chainsaw to it. And yet, there were no tracks. No claw marks. No scat. No signs of movement. Just destruction. Something about the geometry of it all felt wrong. The broken branches weren't random. They radiated out from a single point, like something had exploded silently in the middle of the forest floor. I should have turned around. But curiosity has teeth, and by then, mine were sinking in deep. The air felt colder here. Not by degrees, but by instinct. Like the forest itself had gone still, holding its breath, watching. Have you ever felt watched? I mean really felt it. That horrible tickle at the base of your neck, the one that makes your hair stand on end like static from an old TV? I had that feeling now. Like eyes were threading through the branches. Heavy, curious, hungry. I moved faster. My boot hit a root and I stumbled, catching myself on a tree that bled black sap where the bark had split. It smelled foul. Not sweet like pine. Almost metallic, like rust and rot. I wiped my hand on my jeans and kept going. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what I might have glimpsed. By the time I reached the edge of our property again, the sun had dipped just enough to cast long, amber shadows through the trees. The trail I emerged on was overgrown, familiar and strange all at once. The second my boots hit that path, the forest seemed to breathe again. A chickadee chirped. A squirrel bounded across the leaves. And I felt a shudder run through my chest, like something had been holding me in that silent place, and now it had let go. But I didn't relax. Not fully. Because something had changed. The forest hadn't welcomed me back. It had merely released me. And that was much worse. That night, over stew and bread, I told my dad and brothers what I'd seen. The banging, the silence, the trail of debris, the trees torn up like they'd pissed off a god. My oldest brother, Mark, laughed it off. You spooked yourself, little bro, imagination's a hell of a drug. But my father just watched me. Didn't smile. Didn't blink. When I finished, he said one thing. Don't go back out there alone. And that was the end of it. He didn't explain. Didn't speculate. Just went quiet, like he was remembering something. Something he didn't want to share. 2 days later, we went back together. Me, my dad, and Mark. Armed with rifles and flashlights, more for comfort than need. The forest looked normal. The shredded trees were still there, but my dad just muttered something about windstorms. The trash was gone. Every scrap. Every zipper. Every buckle. The black sap was gone, too. No sign the tree had ever bled at all. Mark kept smirking, but I saw the tight set of his jaw. The way he glanced at the shadows a little too long. Something had cleaned up. Something had covered its tracks. We never found a source for the knocking. Never saw anything out of place again. But something shifted in me after that day. The woods, my woods, weren't the same. I still went in, sure. Still hunted, still walked the trails. But that trust was gone. That feeling of knowing the land like my own skin had been peeled back to reveal something far older, far stranger. There are places man was never meant to tread. And sometimes those places knock back. Years later, after Dad died, I found his journal in a box in the attic. Mostly just notes, hunting spots, deer movement, old gear lists. But one page stood out. Scribbled at the bottom in ink that had run from sweat or maybe tears. South Loop. October '83. Heard it again. Same knocking. Same silence. Lost my compass. Took me 4 hours to get out. Never told the boys. Never will. Don't want them looking for it. I sat with that for a long time. Ran my fingers over the faded ink like it might whisper something more. I had thought it was just me. It wasn't. I've never gone back that deep. Not alone. Not even with company. The forest still calls to me sometimes, on those crisp October mornings when the frost sparkles like crushed glass and the wind carries old scents through the trees. But I don't answer. Because I know what waits beyond the devil's teeth. I know what echoes through those hills. Knock knock. Pause. Knock knock. It's not a person. It's not a machine. It's something older. Something that sees you, even when you can't see it back. And some doors. Some doors knock from the inside. You don't want to open them. Not if you want to come back. Not whole.